a second. I'll be right there. Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm your host, Gurhm, and today I'm talking about Subnautica. Subnautica is an open-world, single-player, sci-fi survival and adventure game. It was developed by Unknown Worlds Entertainment, who's an independent game developer from San Francisco, California. The game just released late January, finally coming out of early access, and I am so stoked to review the game with you today. I have been waiting forever for the official release of this game to come out. I just finished it, clocking in over 60 hours, and all I gotta say right now is, you guys hear that? That sounds like a Reaper. Well, let's make this quick. All I gotta say right now is, I think we already have a contender for Game of the Year 2018. Yeah, okay, so for sure that's a Reaper, and it sounds super pissed off. So let's get this started before it shit shows. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and I want to start out today by talking about Subnautica's settings. This actually turned out to be the lowest scoring category out of all 5, which is why I want to begin here. Now, Subnautica did hit the mark on several key settings options. However, they really fell short on others, so let's dig in and check it out. I'll start by saying that I don't think there's any major game breakers here. However, there are some critical options missing that would really improve the game. So let's kick it off with key rebindability. There's 2 options for every action in the game, and I didn't find any issues here. Everything works great. You can also rebind your mouse, main keyboard, and your arrow keys to anything that you want, and almost everything on your numpad. The only issue I found was that I couldn't bind anything to the number 5 key on my numpad. It's a strange issue to only have one key not work, honestly, but everything else was okay. Let's move on and talk about the video, audio, and gameplay options that are all located under display. The audio options are great and give you the ability to set the right mix between music, sound effects, and ambient noise. The video and gameplay are where the game does fall short though. First, there's no option for colorblind mode, which is total bullshit and a big miss by the developers here. Subnautica is a beautiful game with lots of amazing colors, and not offering this option will have a big impact on those that could benefit from it. There's also no option for a borderless windowed mode. You only have full screen or bordered. Everything else looks okay here with lots of language and resolution options and an FOV slider that goes up to 90. Let's move on to the graphic options, where the game gives you a decent list of settings to change to find the perfect performance and quality balance that you want based on your rig. There is, however, something missing here that has a big impact on the game. There's no draw distance setting. I'll go into more detail here when we score the gameplay, but I'll plant the seed now by saying that there's some serious pop-in that can occur in the game, especially with the grass that was a bit of an immersion breaker due to how distracting it was at times. There are some cool color grading presets and a decent amount of advanced options that I found to balance the category out due to some of the issues I covered. Subnautica does provide some of the important settings required to give PC gamers a good experience. However, there are a few misses here that were really disappointing to see. I'm gonna give settings 3 out of 5 stars. I really hope the devs add in the missing options I covered. I think it would really benefit the game to have draw distance and colorblind mode options. With that said, Subnautica does provide great audio, key rebindability, and advanced graphics. So it was a little bit of a mixed bag here that I do think provides a decent experience. Okay, let's move on and talk about the audio. And honestly, this is where we leave behind most of the issues that I experienced in the game. Subnautica's audio creates an underwater world that sounds absolutely incredible and really complements the game's experience as a whole. First, let's hit the music, which not only delivers some killer beats that made me feel great while exploring, it also totally fit the vibe of the game being set on an alien planet. It also always kicks in at the right moments. It made me want to continue exploring and diving deeper. They also used some really interesting sounds and effects to mix in with the music that created some awesome atmosphere. Speaking of sound effects, let's talk a little bit about those because they are truly amazing in Subnautica. Everything sounds so damn cool and original. It reminded me of when I first played games like Half-Life, Stalker, or Crisis that all had really unique sounds, and even when I hear them today, it makes me think of the game and I feel a sense of nostalgia. And Subnautica does the same thing here, using unique, high-quality sound effects on all the gadgets and devices that you use in the game. I felt like I was totally in a foreign world where science and technology had progressed to a point where someone could get stuck on this planet and be using all this cool gear. And whether I was driving my sub or my prawn suit or racing for the surface to get away from a reaper or to get oxygen, all the sounds combined pulled me in and made me feel like I was actually there. All the audio logs you find and conversations you have in the game sounded really authentic, and the performances by the voice actors were spot on. It also has some good campy humor and drama that made the characters feel real and put a light touch on what is a pretty dark situation you're in. I eventually had my own images of each character in my head, and every time I listened to an audio log, I would see them talking to each other. The voice acting did a really good job of helping to create the image that I had of these characters.
This is the first time I've seen sunlight in months. After all that time in the deep, I'd been dreaming of it. Now that I'm back here, I'm finding it hard to enjoy alone. Father was right. We should never have left this place. We shouldn't have gone so deep. They do not want us down there. Despite my best efforts, ill health is taking hold of me. The visions are getting worse. Marguerite and Father are now part of the ecosystem of this incredible planet. It's reassuring to know that when I go, I'll join them. Until then, well, there's always the view.
Honestly, I couldn't be more impressed with Subnautica's audio. It delivers in such a big way. I'm gonna give it 5 out of 5 stars. To dive below 500 meters and hear the game's low sinking bass hit with its creepy high-pitched ringing mixed in. It was such an amazing feeling. It was a mix of fear and excitement that made for such a fun experience. They did such a good job here. Okay, let's move on and talk about the story. And I'm going to be a little bit vague here with this category because a lot of what makes Subnautica's story great is directly experiencing it for yourself as you progress through the game. On a high level, without divulging any spoilers, you get to play as a character who's traveling through space on a ship that crash lands on an alien world. After surviving the initial wreck, you're left to survive off the planet's and your crash ship's resources to try and find a way home. The story unfolds on a world covered by ocean and, in my experience, takes you on a sci-fi adventure that is totally unforgettable. Now, being a survival game, there's a lot of work required to make sure you can first survive. In the beginning, this means you're managing food and water constantly until you learn your surroundings and start to develop the tools that will help you along the way. At some point, you'll start scavenging from your ship's wreckage and explore to learn the amazing world you're in. This is where the execution of the story really takes hold. Everywhere I went, I encountered something cool, learned something interesting, or found a clue that led me to a new location that I just didn't need to get to, I wanted to get to. When you adventure out, it's also always a risk. You need oxygen, food, water, and most of the time, getting to places and searching for things requires you to put your life on the line. This is where Subnautica's story truly shines. Not only is it a well-crafted sci-fi setting with great characters, it always left me wanting more. I wanted to take every risk because I knew the reward was going to be great, and it delivered from beginning to end without fail. As you adventure through the game, you find audio logs and transcripts, search for other survivors, research tech and indigenous life forms, and encounter other inhabitants on the planet. All this gets woven together in a plot that I found to be an amazing ride to be on. I wish I could say more about the story, but again, I don't want to spoil anything, and discovering it on your own makes for such a killer experience. So I'm giving the story 5 out of 5 stars. I am a huge fan of the survival genre, and although I don't consider Subnautica to be a pure survival game as much as an adventure game, this is actually what makes its story so great to me. It strikes this perfect balance between taking risks and rewarding you, on top of having great writing and cool sci-fi elements. If this sounds like your kind of story, then I am sure you're in for some great surprises here, because it felt like Christmas to me all 60 hours that I put into the game. The writing is just top notch. Okay, let's move on and talk about the graphics. And here, Subnautica continues to impress me with its visuals on so many different levels. Let's check it out. First, I want to start out by talking about the water. Subnautica takes place in the ocean for almost the entire game, and honestly, I was a little skeptical how it would turn out before I played the game. To my surprise, it is really beautiful, and the lighting and shadow effects create an absolutely awesome atmosphere. The game also has day and night cycles that totally complement this as well. The colors of the ocean floor and water all change during sunrise, midday, and sunset, and it also impacts your view distance. Overall, the vibe just changes throughout the entire day and all through the night, which is cool. Swimming at night is just as beautiful as well. You have pools of fish swimming around and tons of plant life on the sea floor that all glows in the dark. It's really something amazing to see. There's so many different ecosystems and areas to explore, and all of them have their own types of plant and sea life that it felt really authentic as I adventured across the planet. All the fish look and move really well too. It felt like I was actually underwater and was a really immersive experience. I will point out that I wish there was an option for higher textures. The textures weren't bad when you have everything turned on high. In fact, the developers did do a good job of striking this nice balance where all the textures are decent and consistent through the world. So you never ran into any situations where you'd have really high fidelity textures and right next to it would be some weird blurry blob. It was all crisp, consistent, and looked good. This never took away from the immersion either, so at the end of the day, it didn't piss me off. I just would have liked the option to push it a little bit farther. I also thought it would have been cool to have some sort of storm system that occurred every once in a while, where you'd get big waves, lightning and thunder that impacted world objects or gameplay in some way. This isn't really a complaint, it was just an idea that I had that I thought would have been cool to see. I hope the developers take what they built here as a platform and continue building on it with cool ideas like this in the future. Overall, the graphics were totally on point and made a truly beautiful world. So many games just cannot get water to look good in my opinion, but Subnautica is totally the exception here. It looks absolutely beautiful and honestly is some of the best water that I have ever seen in a video game. It took me way back to when I used to play Crisis, where I'd walk up to a beach and have these stunning blue waves crashing towards me by the shore. It was so beautiful and so immersive, and Subnautica totally recreated that experience for me. Not only that, but the lighting and physics effects only complemented it as well. I'm gonna give the graphics 5 out of 5 stars. Honestly, I'm sad that I finished the game. I'm gonna miss coming home from a long day at work to dive into this world literally and feel like I'm on some tropical island on vacation where I could go snorkeling or scuba diving. And when it was time to adventure out, there was always some new, beautiful area to explore. Okay, that's it for graphics. Let's move on to our final category today, the gameplay. And Subnautica continues to not let down here at all. Between managing resources, building equipment and shelter, and surviving on a huge alien world, there is so much going on here to talk about. Let's dig right in. I want to start this category off by talking about the resource management. And if you're like me and enjoy this type of gameplay, then I think you'll love how Subnautica plays. It's all based on using sci-fi tech where you go out to search and collect resources, then combine them using tools from your escape pod or that you salvage to create everything you need. This includes food, water, bigger, more badass tools and equipment to make getting around and using resources easier, and ultimately to get off the planet and return home. While doing so, you also try to search for other survivors and start to learn about the mysteries that the planet holds. Ultimately, the resource management becomes a backdrop to the main storyline. They tie this gameplay element to how everything plays out in a really well-balanced way. Throughout my 60 hours in the game, I never felt like the resource management got in the way. It kept a perfect pace, especially after I learned where certain materials were located and what I needed to build certain things. Now, 60 hours may seem like a long time for some people in a single player game, but I did take my time playing it. Honestly, I enjoyed it that much. I've read online that some people finished it under 30 hours, so there's obviously much more streamlined ways to approach the game. But if you're the type of person that really wants to dive deep into a single player game for a while, you will not get disappointed here. You also have a PDA in the game that you use to store all the audio logs, transcripts, blueprints, and research scans, which is very cool. There's so much information and reading to do in the game that helped create Subnautica's world. You can skip some of this if you want, but a fair warning here, some of the game's most important story and location information is found in the reading material you pick up. Personally, I loved this. Being that there's a lot of reading material that comes from just researching different life forms and plant life on the planet, and that there was a decent mix between audio logs, the game does make sure that there's not an overwhelming amount of reading required to get through it. Subnautica also has some great animations, like having your character reach out to open doors, climb ladders, interact with the world using tools you find or build. I think a lot of games out there could learn how to make their games more immersive by adding in cool little animations like Subnautica has. They never take away from being engaged with the game as well. What I mean by that is you never have to take your hands off your mouse and keyboard to watch your character do something. They're just short little animations that add that extra boost to make you feel like you're actually there interacting with things. As you progress through the game, you get to create some super badass tools and equipment as well. The base building, for instance, is really fun, and you can get really creative with where you build and what type of design you want to make. You can also build vehicles like a submarine and prawn suit, which is basically an underwater mech suit, and these help you traverse the world faster and dive extremely deeper within the planet. Both are so damn fun to use. The sub feels and sounds like you're in a submarine, which is amazing. And when I finally created the prawn suit, it made me feel like I was part of the world where I could get around and not feel completely vulnerable to every predator. Once you create base items, you can then modify them by developing these modules that you attach to them in the game. These upgrades allow for deeper diving, larger oxygen containers, stronger wetsuits, and a whole lot more. For the prawn suit, you eventually get to build a grappling hook, which allows you to catapult yourself across the map at high speeds, which was absolutely incredible. I honestly felt like Spider-Man underwater. It was so badass. I did have a few issues with the gameplay that I want to cover. None were game-breaking, but I do want to note them here. First, the game is not optimized as well as it could be. I experienced some pretty big frame rate fluctuations, going from 110 frames per second down to 45 at times. This mostly occurred when diving in and out of the water, and I also noticed it in a few other spots that I don't want to mention to not spoil anything, but it was a little bit of a distraction at times. I also encountered a bug where when building my base too big, the game started to really struggle and all sorts of weird shit started happening. Objects in the world and on my base wouldn't populate at close range. Now, I only began having these issues after I built my base to a certain size. So I deconstructed about a quarter and everything went right back to normal. It's possible I was simply trying to make my base way too big, but there's nothing in the game to limit you or notify you that you could be causing this issue. I really think the devs need to address this somehow so it doesn't impact the game in a negative way like I experienced. Last issue I want to cover is the game's draw distance, which in some areas is extremely noticeable. It's particularly bad when entering into big open areas underwater where there's a lot of grass on the seafloor. Instead of a nice fade in or gradual transition as it moves into your view, huge areas will pop in, which is pretty nasty. I can say that after playing the game for a couple hours, I started to never notice it, but if I took a break and came back, it always was a bit of an immersion breaker. There is a fix that you can find online where you go into the config files of the game and modify some of the values to get different draw distances. However, I experimented with this and it really killed my frame rates in most areas. Ultimately, I think it's something the game developers can improve by optimizing the game and putting draw distance options in the settings. With all that said, these issues didn't even come close to breaking the immersion that Subnautica's gameplay created for me. I crashed on an alien planet, struggled to survive in the first few days. Then, once I started to understand how I could keep myself alive, the whole planet opened up. I made it my home, searched for survivors, hunted down materials to build a base, escaped massive sea leviathans, descended into the dark, cold waters until I was so far down, it actually started heating up. All the while, I became an integrated part of this game and the planet's incredible story. There's a lot of survival and adventure games out there that are really fun, but Subnautica's gameplay to me is totally the exception here, and I'm gonna give it 5 out of 5 stars. Subnautica isn't just fun. It's a whole experience, and it kept me coming back over and over until the very end. Even with some of the performance issues that I mentioned, it never made me feel like I wasn't a part of this huge, beautiful alien world. It was so immersive and so fun. It made me want to keep adventuring out farther and diving deeper every time. All right, on that note, let's move on and give Subnautica a final score. My time in the game was totally unforgettable. It released quite a while ago to early access, and I decided to hold off on playing the game because it looked so promising that I wanted to experience the whole game as a final product. And I am so glad that I did, because it turned out to be way better than expected. I'm gonna give Subnautica 5 out of 5 stars. It was such an amazing ride, and if you like survival and adventure games, then I highly recommend making this your next game purchase. Do not let this one pass by. It is so worth it in so many ways. All right, that's it, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. I had a killer time scoring Subnautica with you today. Please leave a comment below and let me know what you think about the game, and I will see you on the next Gurhm's Garage. GG.